The trees stood tall and motionless, their skeletal branches stretching into the bruised sky as the last light of day faded. Sarah Brooks inhaled sharply, the crisp mountain air stinging her lungs. She had ventured too far. The realization settled in her stomach like a lead weight. She turned in slow circles, scanning for any familiar markers, something, anything that could guide her back to the trail. But the vast Wyoming wilderness stretched endlessly in every direction, an unforgiving labyrinth of towering pines and shadowed ravines. Her GPS was useless, no signal, no trail, just the deepening dusk and the unsettling quiet. A shiver rippled through her. "Think, Sarah. Don't panic." But the primal fear was already creeping in. She had enough supplies to last the night. Barely. Her water bottle was half empty, her energy bar crushed at the bottom of her pack, the tent and fire starter, left behind in her eagerness to explore. She had only planned a short hike, after all. She exhaled slowly, trying to suppress the growing panic, when a rustling sound broke the silence, not the wind, something else. Sarah stiffened, heart hammering as she turned toward the sound. And then she saw them, a pack of wolves. They stood in the fading light, their bodies sleek and powerful, blending seamlessly into the shadows. 6 of them, motionless, watching. Sarah's breath hitched, her muscles tensed, but she didn't dare move. Instinct screamed at her to run, but logic held her frozen in place. Running would trigger the chase. Stay still. The lead. Wolf, a massive creature with silver-streaked fur and amber eyes, took a slow step forward. The others remained behind him, their eyes glinting in the twilight. Not a single sound came from them, no growls, no snarls, just an eerie, assessing silence. Sarah's pulse pounded in her ears. What do they want? The wolf tilted its head slightly, as if reading her thoughts. Then, without a sound, the pack shifted, their dark bodies melting into the encroaching night. They weren't leaving, they were circling. A cold, undeniable truth gripped her. She was not alone in these woods, and whether that was a blessing or a curse, she had no way of knowing. The weight of their eyes pressed against her like a phantom. Touch. Sarah's breath was shallow, measured, each inhale and exhale controlled, though her body screamed for action. The wolves did not lunge, did not bare their teeth. They simply stood, watching her with a patience that was almost unnatural. The lead wolf, the one with the silver-streaked fur, took another step forward. Not aggressive, not hesitant, just deliberate. His amber eyes held something unreadable, something that sent a chill through her bones. Sarah swallowed hard. They should have attacked by now, or left. But they're just standing there. Why? Her fingers tightened around the straps of her backpack, knuckles white. If she ran, she wouldn't stand a chance. If she stayed, what then? The wolves shifted as she did. A synchronized movement, fluid and effortless. They're tracking me. A gust of wind rattled the branches overhead, and Sarah's body tensed involuntarily. The forest was growing darker by the second, and she could feel the temperature plummeting with it. She was losing daylight, losing options. One of the smaller wolves let out a slow exhale, almost a huff, and Sarah swore she saw amusement in its eyes. Are they toying with me? No. Their movements were too methodical, too restrained. If they were hunting her, she wouldn't still be standing. Something about that realization sent a different kind of shiver through her. The lead wolf took another step back, then turned. The others followed, their bodies slipping through the underbrush like shadows. Leaving? No. Sarah took half a step in the opposite direction, and instantly the wolves stopped. They didn't block her path, didn't charge. But the silver wolf turned his head, eyes locking onto hers. Waiting. The message was clear. They want me to follow. A lump formed in her throat. Why? The wind picked up again, and the cold gnawed at her exposed skin. She was running out of time. could try to find her way alone in the dark, or she could follow the wolves. Neither choice felt safe, but one felt fatal. Sarah's pulse pounded as she stood at the crossroads of instinct and reason. Following wolves is insane. Every survival guide, every warning about the wild, screamed at her to turn the other way. And yet, standing alone in the encroaching darkness, she couldn't ignore the gnawing truth. Being alone out here might be worse. The silver-streaked wolf didn't move, his golden eyes reflecting the last slivers of twilight. He wasn't forcing her. He wasn't hurting her. He was waiting. Sarah licked her dry lips, the cold already stiffening her muscles. Her options were vanishing with the light. She had no idea which direction led back to the trail. One wrong turn, and I'll be walking in circles all night. The thought was suffocating. Distant sound echoed through the trees, a low, eerie moan of the wind curling through unseen ravines. It sent a fresh wave of unease crawling over her skin. There's something else out there. She shifted her weight, hesitated, then took a single step toward the pack. The silver wolf turned. The others moved with him, effortlessly silent. They don't hesitate. Why am I? Sarah's breath hitched as she took another step, then another. Her heart drummed against her ribs, but she kept moving, shadowing their fluid forms as they weaved. Through the thickening dark, this is reckless. This is survival. The pack moved as one, leading her deeper into the unknown. And Sarah, against all logic, followed. The wolves moved like whispers through the underbrush, their paws barely disturbing. The forest floor. Sarah followed, every step a struggle against the fear clawing at her mind. The rational part of her screamed that she was making a mistake, that she was walking straight into her own demise. But her instincts, the ones she'd learned to trust, in moments of real danger, told her otherwise. The forest was no longer silent. The creak of branches, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustling of unseen creatures. Night was waking, and Sarah felt the weight of the wilderness pressing in around her. The silver-streaked wolf led the way, his pace steady and confident. He navigated the uneven terrain with ease, stepping over hidden roots and ducking under low-hanging limbs without hesitation. Sarah, on the other hand, stumbled, catching herself against a rough tree trunk. She grimaced. How did they move so effortlessly? A branch snapped behind her. Sarah whirled, heart in her throat. The wind, an animal, nothing, just darkness, shifting and breathing like a living thing. She turned back to the wolves just in time to see one of them, a lean, dark-coated female, pause ahead of her. The wolf stood still, ears pricked, listening. A moment later, she nudged a thick fallen branch with her muzzle, revealing a narrow, barely visible trail beneath it. Sarah's stomach twisted. They know this land better than I ever could. They weren't just moving blindly through the wilderness. They were leading her. But why? She pressed forward, pushing the question aside. The cold was seeping into her bones now, and exhaustion made her limbs feel heavy. She focused on the wolves' movements, mirroring them as best she could. It was almost mesmerizing, the way they weaved through the trees, the silent coordination between them. Then the silver wolf stopped. Sarah froze behind him. Every muscle in his body was taut, his ears swiveling, nose lifted toward the air. The rest of the pack mirrored his posture, a ripple of tension moving through them. The hair on Sarah's arms stood on end. They hear something. Then it came. A low, guttural sound, carried through the trees like a whisper of something unseen. Not a growl, not a howl, but a sound that made her blood run cold. A sound that did not belong to the wolves. The pack did not move. Their bodies were statues of quiet strength, their eyes locked on something beyond Sarah's vision. She swallowed hard, her pulse roaring in her ears. There's something else out here, and the wolves know it. The air had changed. It was heavier. Now, thick with something unseen yet unmistakable. Sarah could feel it pressing against her skin, a primal warning thrumming in her bones. The wolves were still as stone, their breaths measured, their ears twitching toward the darkness beyond. Then she saw them. Tracks, fresh, deep imprints in the dirt, claw marks etched into the frozen earth, larger than a wolf's, too large. Sarah's throat tightened, mountain lion. Her pulse quickened. The pieces clicked together in her mind like jagged puzzle pieces. The wolves weren't hunting her. They were keeping her away from something. And now, whatever that was close. The silver-streaked wolf let out a slow, low exhale, shifting his weight forward. The rest of the pack followed, moving in silent, predatory unison. Their postures had changed, no longer relaxed, no longer indifferent. They were tense, ready, preparing. A deep, throaty growl rolled through the air, not from the wolves. Sarah's stomach dropped. The darkness beyond the trees seemed to shift, taking shape in the faint moonlight. A sleek, muscular form slinked between. The trees, its movement slow, deliberate. Tawny fur rippled over powerful shoulders. The lion had been stalking them, stalking her. Sarah's breath hitched. She knew enough to understand what this meant. Mountain lions were ambush predators. If she could see it now, it had already decided to strike. The wolves stood their ground, their bodies a living wall between Sarah and the predator. The mountain lion hissed, baring long, gleaming fangs. It wasn't afraid of them. The silver wolf's lips curled, revealing ivory teeth. A deep, rumbling growl rose from his chest. The others followed, their growls layering together. Like an unspoken command, Sarah's hands trembled. This is going to happen. And then, the lion moved. The mountain lion lunged, a blur of muscle and claws. It exploded from the shadows, moving faster than Sarah could process. A flash of bared teeth, the sharp snap of a snarl, and then the wolves struck. The silver-streaked leader met the lion mid-air, their bodies colliding with a force that sent both tumbling into the underbrush. The others followed in a seamless, practiced attack, snapping, lunging, circling with deadly precision. Sarah stumbled backward, heart hammering. She wanted to run to escape, but her legs refused to move. All she could do was watch as nature unfolded in its rawest form. The mountain lion twisted, slashing with its powerful claws, catching one of the wolves across the flank. A sharp yelp split the night, but the injured wolf didn't retreat. None of them did. The pack fought as one. While the silver wolf kept the lion occupied, another lunged for its hind leg, teeth sinking into muscle. The cat let out a piercing screech, its body jerking violently as it tried to shake them off. But the wolves didn't let go. They moved with deadly coordination, anticipating every counter, every desperate lunge. Sarah clenched her fists, breath shallow. The fight was brutal, primal, and yet there was something more to it. They're not just fighting for themselves. They're fighting for me. The realization hit her like a blow. They could have left her to fend for herself, to fall prey to the lion. They had no reason to protect her. But they did. The lion, bleeding and exhausted, finally wrenched itself free. It hesitated, panting heavily, ears flattened. The silver wolf stood before it, his chest rising and falling, eyes burning with an unspoken challenge. A moment stretched between them, thick with tension. Then, without another sound, the lion turned and disappeared into the night, vanishing as swiftly as it had come. Silence. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her entire body trembled, her mind struggling to catch up. Wolves stood victorious. The injured one limped slightly, but the others moved around it, nudging, checking. Their pack was intact, their purpose fulfilled. Sarah swallowed hard. They protected me. The silver wolf turned to her then. His golden. His met hers, unblinking, unreadable. And in that gaze she understood. They never saw me as prey. They saw me as something else, something worth saving. The night was still, save for the wind whispering through the trees and Sarah's ragged breaths. The battle was over. The mountain lion was gone. But the weight of what had just happened lingered. In the cold air, the wolves regrouped, their movements fluid, practiced. The injured one limped slightly, but none of them lingered on their wounds. They had done what needed to be done. Sarah's legs felt weak, but she forced herself to stand straight, her gaze locked on the silver wolf. He watched her in return, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. She should leave. She should run in the opposite direction, put as much distance as possible between herself and the wilderness that had nearly swallowed her whole. But she didn't. Instead, she waited. The silver wolf turned, padding forward without hesitation. The others followed. And Sarah, against every instinct, against every rational thought, fell into step behind them. She no longer questioned it. They moved through the forest with quiet purpose, leading her over uneven ground, through narrow trails she never would have found on her own. She didn't ask where they were going. Somehow she already knew. Time blurred. The exhaustion gnawed at her, but she pushed forward, one step at a time. The wolves wove through the trees like shadows, their pace unchanging, unrelenting. Then, after what felt like hours, Sarah saw it, a faint glow. She blinked, her breath catching. Light. Not the moon, not distant stars. A real, human-made light. A ranger station. Relief flooded her, so intense it nearly brought her to her knees. I made it. She turned back, to thank them, to acknowledge them, to say something. But the wolves were already leaving. The silver wolf was the last to disappear, his golden eyes lingering on hers for a heartbeat longer. Then he too faded into the darkness, swallowed whole by the wild. Sarah stood there, breathless, the echo of their presence still lingering in her bones. They were gone, but somehow she knew. They were. Never really meant to stay. The ranger station was warm, safe, everything the forest was not. Sarah sat wrapped in a thick blanket, a cup of steaming coffee cradled between her hands. The rangers had found her at dawn, barely able to speak, exhaustion gripping her body like a vice. They had asked how she survived the night, how she found her way through the vast, merciless wilderness. She had lied not because she wanted to, but because she had to. No one would believe her. No one would understand the silent pact made beneath the moon, the way the wolves had guided her, protected her. If she told the truth, they would call it a hallucination, a fluke, an impossible story crafted by exhaustion and fear. So she said nothing. Days passed. The world moved on, but something inside her had shifted. Back in the comfort of civilization, she should have felt relief. She should have been grateful for hot showers, for soft beds, for the predictable hum of human life. But instead, she felt a strange ache, a longing she couldn't name. It wasn't the fear, it wasn't the danger, it was them. The wolves had left their mark on her, deeper than any wound. They had shown her something untamed, something ancient, something real. And though she had walked away, part of her had never left. One evening, weeks after the ordeal, Sarah stood outside her cabin, staring into the tree line beyond her backyard. The stars were sharp against the ink-black sky, the air crisp with the first bite of winter. Then from deep within the wilderness, it came. A howl, low, mournful, stretching through the night like a whisper meant only for her. Sarah closed her eyes, a slow smile tugging at her lips. She had never been alone that night. She never would be again.